You probably know the famous scene from the Matrix film where Neo was asked to choose between the blue pill, returning to the life he's always known, and the red pill, entering a new world he's never seen. Well, around the same time as the film, Ken Parker was asking guitarists to make their own red pill, blue pill choice. The blue pill was traditional guitars that were paradoxically heavy and fragile, requiring fretwork, neck adjustments, and so on. But the red pill was a new modern guitar design that was light yet sleek, strong and durable, versatile tones, frets that last forever, and, well, most guitarists chose the blue pill. The Parker Guitar Company hemorrhaged money and then shut down. But before it did, Ken Parker created one of the most influential guitars of the last 30 years. This is the Parker Fly guitar. Now, truth be told, I wouldn't be holding the guitar this high if I didn't have to worry about it fitting in the frame of this video. And the Parker Fly is not my personal favorite guitar to play. That title goes to the Parker Night Fly, which you can learn more about up here. But the Fly is my favorite guitar of all time from an innovation and craftsmanship standpoint. And even if you don't like the way it looks, I hope to provide you with evidence of why this guitar was simply incredible for its time and how it has inspired builders even 30 years later. Nonetheless, nothing is perfect, so I'll also discuss some of the Fly's issues to keep things fair later in the video. Prior to creating the Fly guitar, Ken Parker worked as a guitar tech where he got first-hand experience with all of the most common issues plaguing standard electric guitar design.
I worked on everything. I saw everything that went wrong. You got a guitar on your bench and you look at it and you're looking at with a tunematic bridge and it looks like it's exploding. The zinc is turning into foam and it doesn't work. You can't adjust it. It's a piece of junk. You have to go get a new one. I didn't want to be part of that tradition. And that's why I wanted to design an electric guitar so that there would be a guitar that didn't break and didn't need a fret job and didn't go out of tune and could be played in tune and didn't balance poorly and didn't weigh a ton.
As a result, he sought to create an instrument that disappeared in the player's hands. For the non-musician, imagine wearing clothes that are so comfortable you simultaneously feel naked, yet unexposed. After years of experimentation, he came up with a design and workshop that built $10,000 guitars and sold them for only $3,000 in the 1990s and early 2000s. In 2022 money, that's $19,475 and $5,840 respectively. And if you wanted a spoiler about why the company ultimately failed, well, those numbers should pretty much explain it. Now, the goal of a lightweight yet strong body poses major difficulty. Guitars are traditionally made from wood, and while subtracting wood from the instrument will decrease weight, it can also increase fragility. In other words, when crafting with wood, these two goals are almost diametrically opposed. Parker's solution? Sculpt out of wood, but then wrap the entire body in a thin, carbon glass epoxy composite exoskeleton. These instruments are a feathery 4.5 to 5.5 pounds, yet far more durable than some guitars that weigh 10 pounds and above. We can see the texture of the exoskeleton peeking through the paint. It's baked into the wood, making the Fly insusceptible to changes in temperature and humidity. For example, when traveling with traditional guitars, it's common to do tune-ups here and there as you switch climates or locations, just like you do with your car through the seasons. But the Fly is different.
I had a call from a guy who was running a band that was touring in Nigeria. They lost the guitar player's Fly guitar. So we put one in a box, write Nigeria on it, And the next time I saw him, he was laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" And he goes, "I'm in Nigeria. A guitar comes in a gig bag in a cardboard box, and it's in tune."
So there's no adjustments needed in different temperatures, different climates, and it will even stay in tune. Now, this guitar came from a hot, humid Texas to a dry, cold New Jersey, and, well, fresh from Texas to New Jersey. This guitar was made in, I think, 1998. It is 2022. Clearly inspired by Parker guitars, a new amazing company called Aristides is also making fantastic instruments out of a special inorganic material that has similar properties and benefits. But the Fly is still much lighter, and as a reminder, this came nearly 30 years earlier. Truly revolutionary. My second favorite area of the body is this area right here between the horns and the neck, which measures a hilarious 7.7 millimeters. The exact same thickness of the webbing between my thumb and index finger. And even on guitars that I love with amazing neck joints, this region is closer to 34 or 37 millimeters. The Fly is using 78% less wood in this area alone, And we see that same detailed approach throughout the body. And if you're a fan of the attention to detail approach to guitar topics or even learning to play the guitar, consider subscribing to my Guitarcraft newsletter and my Guitarcraft and Other Stuff podcasts, linked below. The headstock itself takes a traditional 6-in-line design and then removes all of the wood that isn't directly supporting the tuners. As a result, we get this sleek, minimalistic design. Now, many have told me that the headstock is ugly, which is of course a subjective opinion that you are entitled to have. But the objective truth is that it's an incredibly efficient use of space and helps to eliminate any potential balance issues. The tuners themselves are locking spurzels, which remain industry standard 30 years later. Similarly, the nut is made by Graphtec using their proprietary graphite material that again is industry standard today. Point being, although both graphite nuts and locking tuners were available in the 1990s, they were not nearly as popular, and this is another area where Ken Parker was ahead of his time. Now, there's a funny story about the neck. The original design had an issue that no other guitar builder can claim to have had. It was too rigid.
For the first year, we used a lot more carbon, and it was a problem because it made the compression strength of the back of the neck so great that we were breaking truss rods trying to compress it. And it made it so the truss rod just wouldn't work.
In my opinion, this process is one of the marks of genius design. For example, it's common for rock climbers to use a harness that can support well over 3,000 pounds. Now, a human falling to their death will never generate that much force, but it's better to overshoot than undershoot. In other words, let's treat every aspect of a guitar design like it's a life or death situation. The neck is fairly thin with a compound radius, which is a pretty common request among modern guitarists. It has a 1-inch carbon fiber strip sandwiched between 2 layers of fiberglass epoxy, which represents the perfect middle ground of rigidity and adjustability. Sure, Ken could have made a perfectly immovable neck like that found on VGA guitars, and that would have been a great guitar for people like me. In fact, I love VGA guitars and I've owned a few of them myself. But that design does pose an issue for everyone else who prefers to adjust their neck, since it literally can't move. The fly will flex when you want it to during setup, but only if you wanted to, which is the perfect compromise. The fingerboard is another sandwich, but now it's epoxy, carbon fiber, and more epoxy. The surface is quite smooth and silky, and as you sweat, it just gets easier to play. We then have 24 stainless steel frets that are glued onto the fingerboard. Now, the standard nickel frets found on traditional guitars will wear down over time and require work, attention, and eventually a replacement. But these stainless steel frets will remain the same forever without maintenance. In 2022, stainless steel frets are more or less an industry standard for modern style guitars, above $1,000, $1,500. But this wasn't even true in 2010, and I challenge you to find any major manufacturer that was putting stainless steel frets on mass-produced guitars in the early 90s. Parker was at least 15 to 20 years ahead of the game in that regard as well. So just to prove a point about the playability and versatility of this guitar, I have the action set as low as I can get it, and trust me, I would never play with action this low, you would never play with action this low. I'll put some exact measurements right here on the screen, but even at this absolute crazy low action that no one would play with, the guitar is still perfectly fine. Every note is ringing out, there's no fret buzz, all of that stuff. So anywhere on the fretboard, from there, all the way up, totally fine. Chords, fine. Everywhere we go, no issues. Okay. So no matter what you want to do with this guitar, you can set it low, you can set it high, you can add a bow, you can take away a bow. It's going to be able to be set up exactly like how you want it to play. And then it's going to stay there without moving forever. Now, I want to start our body discussion by addressing one of the biggest complaints about the Fly. It's ugly. And although I already said beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I want to provide an argument for why the Fly is beautiful in terms of its repeated patterns. For example, in music, a chorus repeats in between the verses, and we enjoy that repetition within the structure of a song. Or a lick can be repeated in a solo or in a song, and that repetition takes on a sense of beauty. We also see this in physical art as different shapes are used throughout the piece to create a sense of cohesion. The Parker Fly uses this same trick. If you look closely, you'll see that the headstock, the upper horn, and the lower horn are all incredibly similar in terms of both shape and angle. We also see that the angle of the curve on the forearm rest is similar to the leg rest. Then throughout the body, there are several lines and curves that break up what would be an otherwise completely flat body. Now, you may still think of this as an ugly design, and that's fine, But you can't make an argument that is ugly because it lacks flow or symmetry. That is simply incorrect. Now, my absolute favorite aspect of the body is the heel joint. When compared to other set neck heel joints, it is beautiful and sleek, but it is also incredibly functional. There are many guitars that have both a lower horn and great high fret access. But for my admittedly largest hands, even a slight lower horn can interfere with my movement at the higher frets. As we play in this area of the guitar, our hands naturally move in a down and away arc. Thus, anything in that region can hit the hand and ruin flow. In fact, this angle, the movement of the hand in this way, is the reason why some companies sculpt the front of the guitar's lower horn instead of just the back of the horn. The Parker Fly's lower horn actually curves down and away instead of down and in, and as a result, the arc of my hand flows perfectly without touching the horn. And although I do have other guitars that have equally great high fret access, none do it while maintaining a substantial lower horn. That isn't good or bad, it's just a very cool, unique design choice by Parker. Now, to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the bridge and electronics, I want to make a quick comparison to Apple, and for the nerds watching, I'm talking about Steve Jobs era Apple. Now, when the iPhone first came out, it looked something like this, you'll remember. The whole selling point of the phone was that you had an iPhone, an iPod, a MacBook, and software, and this was all going to be a seamless workflow without issues. And it worked pretty well. Connecting your iPhone to your MacBook was much easier than connecting your printer to a PC. But that ease of use came at a cost because in order to make everything work seamlessly, Apple created a closed ecosystem with very few customizable features. So if you're someone who wanted a random app on your old school iPhone or a customizable hard drive on your MacBook, well, Apple was the wrong company for you. And that's the story of the Parker Fly bridge and electronics. This bridge is absolutely amazing. It can be set to floating like a Floyd Rose style bridge, or it can be set to bend down only, which stabilizes the tuning. You can also switch between these modes instantly with a simple lever on the back of the bridge. Its balance points are self-contained and never need maintenance. The tension wheel poking through the body makes adjustments a breeze. These saddles are also made from a special aluminum that is corrosion resistant, and it even has special piezo electronics to replicate the sound of an acoustic instrument. Even the arm has a special design element as it's shaped like an Allen key instead of the standard cylindrical arms found on every other bridge. And you can adjust how tight you want that arm to be with a screw in the back, and of course it stays perfectly in tune. We have to also keep in mind that this tuning stability on this setup only uses the bridge, locking tuners, and no locking nut. And this setup is very common today, but again, it was far less common in the 90s. But although this system works absolutely flawlessly on the Parker Fly guitar, it also suffers from the Apple ecosystem issue. And as fans, we've been dealing with this now because Parker Guitars has been closed since 2016. If one of your saddles goes bad, it'll be hard to find a replacement. If you need a new trem arm, very difficult to find a replacement, so on and so forth. If anything happens to this bridge, it's going to be extremely expensive, if not impossible to fix. One common example that fans are now dealing with is the proprietary Parker Fly spring that's part of the bridge. Now, just about every other floating bridge on the planet uses a set of springs in the back you can buy literally anywhere for a couple of dollars. In fact, let's see. They look like this. Now, by comparison, the Fly uses a proprietary flat spring that was only made by Parker. Moreover, you need to change the springs to fit your string gauges. So for example, if you use 9 to 42, you need the 9 spring, 10 to 48, you need the 10 spring, so on and so forth. Needless to say, these springs, especially the 9 spring and the even rarer 8 spring, are incredibly rare, and if you find one, it's going to be very expensive. And as we move to the electronics, the same issue holds true. Most electric guitars use simple point-to-point wire and solder along with industry standard dimensions for pickups. As a whole, this aspect of an electric guitar is easily customizable. In fact, it's a common first project for even new or hobbyist guitarists. Now, the Fly appears to have a standard DiMarzio humbucker configuration with a 3-way switch. But upon closer examination, things aren't so simple. There are no mounting screws, and instead screws are hidden in one of the pole pieces for each pickup. But more importantly, the Fly's body is so thin that a standard pickup cannot fit in it. As a result, these pickups are actually customized to be thinner than standard, and most companies are not willing to retrofit them today without a customer paying well above normal costs. But even if you do buy your special custom thin pickups, you'll see that the Fly's electronics use a circuit board instead of normal point-to-point wiring. This will require a more experienced tech to work with, and if it does ever break, you'll have a big job on your hands. The rest of the electronics are also unique. We have a master volume and a master tone for the magnetic pickups, then a stacked volume tone knob for the piezo bridge, and finally an additional master volume knob. This is helpful because if you craft a nice mixed tone between the magnetic and piezo pickup, you don't have to change the balance of these two systems to change the overall volume that's coming out of the instrument. We have a normal 3-way switch for the magnetic pickups, and then an additional 3-way switch that sets the guitar to either magnetic pickups, magnetic and piezo bridge, or just piezo bridge. You can even further customize the Piezo Sound from the circuit board itself. Finally, we have a red button that changes between mono and stereo outputs. With mono selected, the entire system runs into one amplifier with a standard cable. If you select stereo, you can send the Piezo Sound and the magnetic signals to separate systems, and all of these options make for a very versatile guitar from jazz to metal and everything in between. So we can start with a basic jazz tone. I'm on the neck pickup, volume all the way up, tone on about 5, and then we have a clean amp tone with just a little bit of reverb, but then we get this. So pretty standard. But there's another clean tone that I love this guitar for, so we're still on the neck pickup on full, bass is still on 5, but then we're going to bring in the piezo bridge. We're going to turn that also to about 5 on the volume, and then we'll bring the tone down to about 8 and add in a little bit of reverb. Now, of course, if you're in a live situation, you're not going to be able to quickly pull up this tone. However, if you're in the studio, this is a beautiful, clean tone. The middle pickup on full is a really nice funk tone. It has a lot of that quack. So that's a fun tone as well. And I know absolutely nothing about metal tones on the Axe Effects, so I just downloaded the McRocklin patch and it sounds like this. But even the small details that most people overlook are special on the Fly. You won't find these knobs on any other guitar. The simple 9-volt battery jack has special screws and a special plate that are difficult to lose, which is great for the owner. The output jack solves the small but recurring issue of needing to constantly tighten the nut. Even the original instructions manual is a piece of art, building on the craftsman aesthetic. Now, some among you may ask why Parker Phil as a company. To answer this, we simply have to go back to the statement I said earlier in the video. They made $10,000 guitars and sold them for $3,000. Ken Parker led his company for 10 years, and we fans use the terms pre-refined to designate these years from 1993 to 2003. When the company was bought and sold, several attempts were made to design new guitars with greater mass appeal. Less pointy horns, 3 per side headstocks, so on and so forth. And several cost-saving attempts branded as refinements were also attempted to make the company more profitable. Ken Parker and others have said multiple times that if there was a way to save money, we would have found it. And that appears to be true. Now, I personally don't believe that everything made in the refined era was bad. For example, I have this beautiful refined Southern Nightfly, and it's fun to play, and I think it looks absolutely stunning. That being said, it came with a failed truss rod and a permanently irreversible bow, which kind of speaks to Ken Parker's point about trying to cut corners and save costs. Many Parker skeptics also pointed to issues of glue frets falling off the fretboard, which is an issue that largely began during the refined era, especially the guitars made around 2008. Nowadays, the price of pre-refined flies like this one have skyrocketed, but I think for around $3,000 this is still an amazing guitar. Certainly a steal for under $3,000 as long as you are okay with a few of these potential issues. Number one, the neck is quite thin. That isn't a good or bad thing, but it's important to know. I prefer a thicker neck, which is why I prefer the Nightfly models over the Fly. Second, the upper horn has a propensity to poke you in the chest in certain playing positions. This is a major complaint that the refinement era designers attempted to rectify. I too occasionally experience the poke from the Fly, but again, I find this slightly less bothersome on the Nightfly, but really this isn't one of my gripes with the instrument. And number three, these pickups have a very distinct sound that are fine, but certainly not my preference. But I found that I can fix this issue with a simple EQ pedal, but of course your mileage may vary. Now, for me personally, those were the biggest issues for the Fly, and if you can live with them, I think you'll have a guitar you'll cherish for a lifetime. But if you want a guitar you can customize a bit more, and you want a bigger neck girth like I do, you may want to check out the Nightfly guitar, which I discussed in the video right here. If you think I'm a detail-oriented guitar reviewer, I can promise you I'm an even better guitar teacher. Check out this playlist over here for my courses, and my paid courses linked below. By the way, I'm Andre Flood, and I'll talk to you soon.